An estimated 30,000 Argentines disappeared. Every night the police hauled the bodies to cemeteries and buried them in unmarked graves. Over the last year, José Rejan has exhumed graves of people killed during the dictatorship. Rejan received death threats when he made this public.
Después tenemos otro NN más bajo, barba y bigote. Es como estaban en los libros oficiales. Lo encontramos en el libro 17. Y después acá, cuando llegamos al grupo de NN, el responsable de la inhumación es comisaría Lomas Primera.
Gladys Valleja grew up next to the cemetery and witnessed what happened.
Entraron los camiones, claro, donde traían los cuerpos. Fue muy doloroso y queda uno muy marcado por todo esto, ¿no? Es algo que no se olvida.
Es más, cuando venían los camiones, bueno, se dice también que se escuchaban los quejidos.
The police and military as a whole took part in the killing and looting of citizens. The military and police hunted down students, teachers, union activists, leftists. Jews in particular were persecuted. The mothers of the disappeared tried desperately to get the attention of the world.
Son nuestra última esperanza. Por favor, ayúdennos. Ayúdennos, por favor. Son nuestra última esperanza.
Argentina returned to democracy, but the killers were never punished. Many are still around and in uniform. Military and policemen were involved when, in the 90s, Buenos Aires was hit by terrorist attacks. When in '92 the Israeli embassy was hit by a car bomb, about 30 people were missing. One of them, David Ben Rafael, was a young Israeli diplomat, the son of an American, Ralph Goldman.
I was told that they had seen David on television, and I assumed that this is typically David. He was out helping. And at 6:30 the next morning, I got a call from our daughter Judy in Jerusalem that a few minutes earlier they'd come from the Foreign Office to tell her that David was among the missing. And that's how we got the shock. We quickly got dressed, and I was determined to go down to Argentina for myself. And it was only when I arrived at where the Israel Embassy had its headquarters at the hotel that they had just found him, almost 48 hours later. Knew there was nothing I could do to bring David back. But I also knew that there has to be justice, because that's what he believed in. That's what we all believed in. That's what we were brought up on. And so I called New York and asked my good friend Amir Shaviv, find me Bialik's poem called The City of Slaughter, which was written by Bialik on the occasion of the great anti-Semitic outburst in Ukraine. And I wrote to Mr. Menem, and I sent him the poem. I said, I expect the government of Argentina to seek justice.
President Menem promised again and again to go after the terrorists.
Basta la barbarie. Como presidente de la República Argentina, como ciudadano, me comprometo nuevamente a no dejar impune este atentado. Me comprometo.
I believe if there's the will, they can find the killers, but no results. And the no results are the product of lacking the will to have results or having other agendas.
Ralph Goldman was the right hand of Ben-Gurion, one of Israel's founding fathers. Goldman, a world Jewish leader, spent years searching for information about the attack, and he tried to put more pressure on the Argentines.
If you ask the leadership here, they'll say, yes, it's a priority for us, but day-to-day things take over.
Goldman cannot hide his disappointment that he never got answers from the Israelis either.
I've always believed that the Israeli government will eventually do what has to be done. David was killed because he was a Jew and Israeli. I don't want to make this into a personal issue, you know. Thousands of people have been murdered by these terrorists. And the Western world, this world, let this disease spread.
It was a Monday morning in July, winter in Buenos Aires. I went to work just like any other morning, not knowing that this day would change my life forever. Who is ever prepared for when disaster hits? Schools were on a winter break. That's why I took little Sebastián with me to the city. We walked down Calle Pasteur. It's here that the Jewish Community Center, AMIA, was located. We passed the building just before 10 o'clock when it happened.
Un ruido muy fuerte, un viento muy fuerte, que yo me sentí como si tú te pusieras una hormiga en la mano y la soplaras.
The blast had whipped little Sebastián away from Rosa's hand. Wounded and confused, I went to look for my son. I had lost my shoes. Glass and steel splinters got in my feet. I saw somebody moving away, and I thought that he might take Sebastián. Inside the building, workers were trapped because the floors had caved in.
You could not breathe and you could not see anything. It was like not too dark, but having dust before your eyes. So I wanted to go back. I didn't know that the floor was ending a meter from where I was standing at that precise instant. Somebody took my hand and said, "Don't go forward, there's nothing there."
Anna Weinstein was one of the very few inside AMIA who survived. She managed to crawl out at the back of the collapsing building. Hundreds of wounded had to be carried away, but the streets became quickly jammed. There was no organization, no direction. People kept asking, was it a gas explosion? Nobody understood what had happened. There was a sense of doom and failure. This should not have happened.
Yo me entero de que había sido una bomba ese mismo día, pero a la noche muy tarde. Me entero de que mi hijo había fallecido y que había sido una bomba.
A mano, con baldes.
The search for survivors went on day and night.
Como se puede, con máquinas.
30 hours after the attack, an older man, Jacobo Chemanuel, is found alive under the rubble. He gave hope that one can escape from the shadows of death. He was the last survivor. But the next day, Chemanuel died from exhaustion. Relatives and friends of those who are missing wait for news, not knowing what and who to believe.
Y eso fue el primer día de martirio, porque no sabíamos nada, y no sabíamos nada de Norma, no sabíamos nada de Agustín.
En un principio los dos también, es como que más que nada buscábamos a mi mamá, porque si alguien se podía salvar más fácil era Agustín. Mi mamá era chiquitita, era menudita, no, ante el estar abajo de los escombros no iba a resistir mucho.
But the mother, the fragile one, survived.
Y apareció el 21 de julio, que era el día de mi cumpleaños. El regalo fue que nos avisaron que Agustín, había aparecido el cuerpo de Agustín, estaba muerto.
Ponemos que debe estar en alguna parte, pero evidentemente la única información que tenemos es esa, la comunicación telefónica que hizo después del atentado. O sea que él sobrevivió al atentado seguramente.
Somebody thought he had seen Laura Ginsberg's husband that morning helping in the rescue.
Everybody told me that he was alive. I remember a man read a list of the different names of the survivors, and inside that list the name of my husband was also there. So I began to look for him in the hospitals, in the police stations.
Laura Ginsberg looked for 3 long days and nights. Whoever said he had seen her husband alive after the bombing had been mistaken.
It was really difficult to live with the idea that he would never come back.
Atención, 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 cuidado, 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 cuidado. Terrible, por Dios.
The rescue workers were all becoming exhausted. More accidents happened. They shouted for quiet so they could listen for signs of life. How many were trapped under the rubble and could not make themselves heard?
Are your government ready for sending any kind of specialist?
Yes, we have approached the authorities. We were ready to send in an immediate team which is specialized to handle these sort of events, and your government immediately reacted positively.
The Israelis had been slow to react when the embassy was bombed. Now they jumped into action. With her high-tech listening devices, they could pick up on every faint heartbeat under the rubble. The people of Buenos Aires believed that in some magical way the Israelis could stop the suffering. There was a new energy in the streets. Everyone volunteered.
De 20 años, consuelo de los que viven siempre arrastrados por la rutina. Qué cosa seria.
For some reason, the President Carlos Menem never visited the bombing site. Menem is of Syrian descent and well connected in the Middle East. Rumors were flying around that he knew who was behind the attack. For his first presidential campaign in 1988, Menem collected campaign funds from his former homeland, Syria, and Libya, according to his campaign manager. Whatever deal Menem made with Syria, once in office he followed a strong pro-Western course. He broke off a joint venture with Syria for the development of a nuclear missile system. Menem angered his Arab supporters even more when he visited Israel, the first Argentine president ever to do so, and he worked hard to make Latin America more Israel-friendly, winning support from American Jewish organizations. 4 months after the Amia bombing, Menem went back to Syria and spoke for hours with the late ruler Hafiz Assad. Were the attacks in Buenos Aires related to Menem's betrayal?
The 2 bombings, to me, were part of a revenge if anything, against Carlos Menem. He should have been warned. He should have been talked to. He should have received threats. He should know what went on.
Son asesinos, fundamentalistas asesinos.
On the evening news, world leaders offered condolences. The U.S. again accused Iran and Islamic fundamentalists. No mention of Syria.
Están luchando en contra de nosotros y esto es una nueva prueba que el pueblo judío todo es una meta de este terrorismo.
At a very late stage, the bombing site was finally cleared from visitors and onlookers. The police forces did not know how to handle the situation.
They were running around screaming, saying, wow, what a bombing. And they didn't even know how to clear the site to rescue the victims and at the same time preserve the physical evidence of the bombing. So much was lost. They botched it.
The police dumped the debris in an open field. The wreckage, including the remnants of the van that carried the bomb, was left out there for months. On the Thursday after the bombing, the people of Buenos Aires commemorated the attack. This had been the second terrorist bombing in 2 years. The Menem government was called to task for the country's lack of security. There were some mixed feelings about the banner. Why not, "We are all Argentines"? Jewish graves are often desecrated. In this very Catholic country, anti-Semitism never subsided. A century ago, Jewish immigrants started building communities in Argentina's vast empty spaces. Jewish gauchos, macho cowboys, became legendary. The agricultural communities prospered. The Jewish community in Argentina grew to be the second largest in the Americas. The children moved on in life, went to college, and became city dwellers. When Hitler took power, anti-Semitism in Argentina flared up.
Argentina was the home of the largest Nazi party outside Germany in the 30s.
Hitler didn't think only about Europe, of conquering Europe. There are writings where he's referring expressly to Latin America. So there were many Nazi people that came here and created groups of attack.
After the Second World War, a new wave of immigrants arrived from Europe. Nazis were welcomed by President Juan Perón, who refused to extradite the German war criminals.
You'll actually find that many of the ships that brought Nazis to Argentina actually brought, the same ship would bring a large contingent of Jews, only that the Jews would travel third class and the Nazis would be traveling first class.
Many Argentine Jews were strong supporters of Israel. Anti-Semites questioned whether they were true Argentinians. Since the bombing of the community center, they gather in front of the courthouse every Monday morning at the hour of the bombing. Memoria Activa, friends and relatives of the victims. In the tradition of the mothers of the disappeared, they protest that after all these years, the attacks remain unresolved. Laura Ginsberg joined after a long depression.
My life began to be different. It became necessary for me to begin to contact with the other families and to go to the meetings on Monday mornings and to claim for justice. Something that was important for me, for my children. I am angry because the government did nothing, absolutely nothing, in order to investigate properly and to find the criminals.
In 1997, on the third anniversary of the bombing, Laura Ginsberg grabbed the microphone.
Yo acuso al gobierno de Menem y Duhalde de encubrir la conexión local que sirvió para matar a nuestros familiares.
It was a historic moment when many in the Jewish community joined Laura's open criticism of the government and their own leaders.
Bueno, este personaje...
Radio talk show host Hermann Schiller remembers how Laura's speech embarrassed the leadership of the Jewish organizations.
Cuando Laura Ginsberg, esta aguerrida militante de memoria activa, cuando delante de Corach y delante de Veraja denunció lo que estaba pasando, las autoridades de la comunidad, el presidente de la DA y el presidente de la AMIA, fueron a la casa de gobierno a pedir perdón. Fueron a pedir perdón. En hebreo hay una palabra muy gráfica, se llama shtadlanut, y que según el diccionario hebreo de Ibn Shoshan, quiere decir condescendencia con el poder. Esto es la clave de la dirección de la comunidad judía. Condescendencia con el poder fue antes, durante el atentado y después del atentado.
This grand European-looking, sophisticated and fast-paced capital seems to have forgotten the bombings of the early 90s. It is Easter. The church at the Plaza de Mayo draws a large crowd. For one day, they want to forget Argentina's economic downturn.